the only person that's going out on the airwaves for Labour is Wes Streeting.
Jonathan Ashworth, Pat McFadden, Bridget Phillipson,
Mel
Rachel
Stride.
Reeves. Mel Stride is the only person who goes out for the Tory party
That's
at the
not
moment,
true.
morning after morning.
Wes Streeting was accused this morning of being the Labour version of Mel Stride. He was apparently really outraged by that. But I think that both parties
one of them's got a bit more of a future than the other, and I don't think it's Mel Stride.
Blimey, this is getting personal.
Sam, I've been shopping. I've got us some snacks.
What have you got us?
We've got some Haribo and some Twix, because at the Sky debate, Rishi Sunak was asked, what is one thing that people don't know about you which would make them like you more? And he said that he loves sugar, he loves Haribo, and he loves Twixes. So you're a Twix girl or a Haribo girl?
Oh, let's go Haribo. Now you've brought in sugary snacks, John. I like you so much more.
Well, you might like me even more. It is our second podcast. I actually do have to make an apology because you had a secret at the first podcast. It was your birthday. It was your birthday, and we didn't get to say happy birthday to you. So here it is.
I was actually trying to keep it secret.
I know, it's not secret anymore. Your birthday cupcake.
Well, now I love you, John. You brought me Twixes, Haribo, and a belated birthday cake. So thank you very much. That's very kind.
Should we get on with the podcast? I'm John Stevens, political editor of The Mirror.
And I'm Sam Lister, political editor at The Express.
And this is The Division Bell. So, Sam, we've got a new term coined this week, supermajority. What is that?
Sounds exciting. This is the latest Tory way to energise their base, what's left of it. And they are warning them that there is a danger of a Labour supermajority. Essentially, they're saying, if you don't get out and vote, Labour are going to have this enormous landslide, even bigger than Tony Blair, and it will be a socialist superstate, which clearly, if you're of a conservative mindset, is not something you want. So they're using that as a way to
It's a bit strange to start wheeling out arguments like that now, though, isn't it? This is the sort of thing in the final days of the campaign when it looks like you're not going to win, you go out and say, fine, they're going to win, but let's not give them a massive majority. We're 3 weeks out from the election. It is desperate, isn't it?
Desperate, I think, is a bit harsh, but I would say it's probably a bit early. I think that is the sort of thing in the final days you want to say to people, look, this is the reality of the position we're in. If the polls are right, then this is going to be a huge Labour majority. It was described to me recently as a lukewarm landslide, and I think that's probably actually a very accurate term. If the polls translate into reality,
it's not very lukewarm if it's a big majority, though, is it? How can that doesn't make sense?
Because it's not an enthusiastic one, is it? It's a landslide
enthusiastic, but people just accidentally voted for
It's
them.
a landslide by default. It's not a we love you, Tony Blair style majority, is it? It's a we've had enough of these guys, so we're going to stay at home, or we're going to vote for smaller parties. And that allows Labour to have this big majority. So I think that's what they're trying to warn. They're trying to warn of the realities of staying at home, being fed up with the Tories, but not, not actually getting out there and just holding your nose if you're fed up with them at the moment.
I think that I can see that for some MPs running a local campaign, you can say it's fine, the Tories are going to get out, but keep me as your local representative. I can see it works quite well for them. And I can see also, if you're trying to discourage Labour voters from going out and voting at the polling booth, you can just say, well, you don't need to bother because Labour are clearly going to win. I think that Labour voters will want to go out there, though. I think they will be energised. And I think there is a risk. If Tory voters think, well, the game is up, then they might not bother to go out either. And where do you go from here? If you're conceding defeat 3 weeks out, what on earth do you talk about for the next 3 weeks?
I think a lot has... I think it's quite overblown, actually. I mean, it was one comment by Grant Shapps yesterday.
It's one comment backed up by Facebook ads.
That is true, but the Prime Minister himself has said, I'm still fighting, I will fight every day, I will fight to the very end, I'm fighting to win. And so you have to kind of, it's not as though the Prime Minister's gone out there and gone, right, I'm putting my feet up, I know this is game over, whatever. That isn't what's happening here. He's still putting himself through these debates, he's still out on the campaign trail every day.
he doesn't look like someone who's still really in the game, though, does it? You looked at him at that Sky News debate, although it wasn't really a debate because they were on the stage at different times, and he did look like he'd given up. He was just sat there with the audience, who were pretty wild. We've seen in some of these TV debates the audience didn't have much to say, but last night you could barely stop them speaking, and everyone, he got laughed at, he got heckled, he got booed, and you could see that he just looked really uncomfortable.
It was a hostile audience, but it was hostile for both of them, I would say.
It was hostile for both of them.
I mean, it wasn't like Keir Starmer got an easy ride at that event. I mean, they both had a pretty tough time. I think Rishi Sunak, clearly, he's the one there defending the record of the last 14 years of a Conservative government.
It's an appalling record.
I would disagree with that, John, clearly. We can go into that. We can relitigate. That's the fashionable term. Let's relitigate the last 14 years. But obviously, he's not just defending his own record. He's defending the record of Liz Truss, of Boris Johnson, of David Cameron. Now, there are many people who dislike those people for different reasons. If you are a Remainer, for example, you may still be bearing a burning grudge against David Cameron. He's got to deal with that. Obviously, Boris Johnson, very popular, also very unpopular, depending on your point of view. He's a Marmite character, we know that. Liz Truss, obviously, everyone knows what happened there. He has to defend all of those. That's a much tougher gig. That is a much tougher thing to go and do. Keir Starmer goes in there with nothing to say and just has to get through it without slipping up. Now, I thought it was interesting that actually, despite the fact he has no record to defend, he can just make as many empty promises as he wants. The audience did not give him an easy ride, and I thought that was very interesting. I think what it tells me is people are just quite fed up of politics. They feel quite worn down. They've had a lot to go through, the pandemic, all the other things we've talked about before. People are quite weary, and they just don't really feel that anybody is giving them what they want. I think that is a problem for all of the major parties, for both of the major parties, and that's allowing the smaller parties to kind of make inroads, really. And I think for Keir Starmer, actually, we were talking about, you were saying about how people want to go out and vote for him. Well, actually, quite a few people want to go out and vote for the Greens.
Well, let's see the numbers of how many people go out and vote for the Greens.
But the Labour Party are very, again, it's a kind of reform effect, isn't it? They might have a big number of votes nationally, but a small number, if any, of seats when push comes to shove. But I know Labour are very, very concerned about Bristol, about losing a seat in Bristol to the Greens, which is quite an odd thing when you think about it, when they're on course for such a super majority, we're being told, that they could actually potentially lose a seat to the Green Party. So, but I think that is the worry, isn't it, for Labour, that not just the Tories, for Labour, this is a thing as well, that actually you don't want your own voters to be so complacent that they think, well, actually, I'm a bit more left-wing than Keir Starmer, so I'm going to vote Green. There is a danger on both sides.
I think we need to wait to see how many people vote for the different parties. I think when we actually come to polling day, we can see whether people were enthusiastic. We can see whether people were enthusiastic for Labour or not. I think, though, on that argument that the Tories don't want to talk about the last 14 years, and we heard David Cameron on the radio on behalf of Rishi Sunak, because clearly he's not got any other ministers who want to go out and go into bat for him.
Oh, come on.
But
David
Cameron went on the radio. David Cameron went on the radio and he was saying, Labour just wanted to talk about the last 14 years. Well, it's hard to do anything but talk about the last 14 years if you're having to bring back David Cameron, the Prime Minister, from 14 years to defend you.
I think that's really unfair. I think Labour have not been. Have we seen Angie Rayner out on the airwaves?
We see her at the debates. We saw her at the debate last week. We saw
Penny Mordaunt at the debates last week. The only person that's going out on the airwaves for Labour is Wes Streeting.
Jonathan Ashworth, Pat McFadden, Bridget Phillipson,
Mel
Rachel
Stride.
Reeves. Mel Stride is the only person who goes out for the Tory party at the moment, morning after morning.
Wes Streeting was accused this morning of being the Labour version of Mel Stride. He was apparently really outraged by that. But I think that both parties
one of them's got a bit more of a future than the other, and I don't think it's Mel Stride.
Blimey, this is getting personal. Wes Streeting clearly enjoys going on the media. I think that's fair to say. So he's obviously quite willing to go out there whenever he's asked. But I think you can't say that you're only seeing, David Cameron. That clearly isn't the case. So, yeah, but anyway, we were talking, John, about how hostile the audience were in Grimsby. They really didn't seem to like either. And I was really struck by the fact that Keir Starmer was challenged about his robotic nature. And there was an audience member who said, look, I was very kind of into you when you were the Director of Public Prosecutions. I thought
So
you
it's
were...
a slightly strange thing to say. I was.
Well,
I thought
yeah,
you were,
it was
I'm
deep
not
knowledge.
sure. A big fan
It
of
was
you in your
deep knowledge.
DPP days.
But, you know, Keir Starmer has always made a lot of play, hasn't he, about his, you know, duty, his public service. He is a man who prosecuted the bad guys, also defended his buttery, but we'll gloss over that bit. And so he has always kind of put that front and centre of his personal pitch to voters, hasn't he? This voter said, OK, fine, I liked you when you were doing all that stuff, but actually now you've become a politician. You are as, you know, well, I don't know, as, I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying it. But, you know, as...
Spit it out, Sam, come on.
As ruthless and unprincipled as any politician needs to be to get to those top jobs. And if you're being cynical about it anyway. And Keir Starmer, confronted by an audience member who says, you're like a robot, he malfunctioned. You know, switch him on, switch him off again. I mean, it was about 10, 20 seconds before he kind of could respond to this guy.
It wasn't 20 seconds. It was not. It was
felt
a
like
couple
a
of
lifetime.
seconds. It might have
like
felt like that. I mean,
lifetime.
when he started the question, he did, to be honest, smile and laughed. And there were a couple of questions that were pretty hostile. I think one of them was from Beth Rigby. And he did smile. Yeah, when he was told boring, he said, oh, well, thank you. I think he took it quite well. But clearly the robot question did take him by surprise. And he did find it difficult to answer that one. But he's on stage. You've got a debate. I think that politicians sometimes obviously have to think about what they're going to say next.
Yeah, and I think this is quite interesting, actually, because I think the biggest peril for all leaders when they are having these debates, when they are up before a studio audience, when they are being grilled by, you know, Laura Kuenssberg or Beth Rigby or any of the kind of big figures on the broadcast scene, the biggest peril for them is not what are you going to do about X, Y, and Z? How are you going to fix the NHS? What are you going to do about social care? Because they can prep for those, and they have answers, and they have the response for the first time they're asked it, the second time they're asked it, the third time they're asked it, and then they know that the broadcast teams will move on to another subject because there's 5 minutes. They're not going to spend the whole time asking the same question.
When they get asked, you know, when have you ever had to go without in your life, then Rishi Sunak malfunctioned. He couldn't answer that. He just said, oh, lots of things, and then gave possibly the worst answer he's given of the campaign so far, saying, boo-hoo, poor me, we didn't have Sky TV when I was a child.
I don't think he was saying poor me. I think he was asked, what did you go without? And that's what he went without. Now, obviously, it doesn't play well because it plays into this whole
out of touch.
Concern
Can
about
you use a
him
contactless card machine? Ask a homeless man, do you want a job in business?
But what was he supposed to say to that? And he was asked repeatedly about, you know, what did you go without? Well, obviously, it's a gotcha question, isn't it? Because we know he came from a nice, comfortable family and went to a posh school. So the whole point of that question was designed to make him look stupid.
He did.
That was the whole point of it. Now, I think he should have had a better kind of answer to that because it is a sort of easy thing you can ask somebody who is really rich. Go on, tell us, let's embarrass you about how rich you are. It's an easy way to go, isn't it? A bit of a cheap shot, fine. It did its job. But I think also, you know, we've alluded to it already, the Haribo incident where he was asked, tell us something to make us like you. And on the spot, he has to think of... There is no answer to that. If I said, John, tell me something to make me like you, what would you say? There is no...
I just bought you a cake.
Well,
that was a nice thing to...
But it's such a silly thing because there is no answer. You know, there is nothing you can say because clearly that's not how life works. So again, it's designed to make him look stupid. The thing for politicians is they have to have some answer ready for those types of questions, but it is very hard. And in the moment, you know, quite often, as we've seen with Keir Starmer and his boring, robotic questions, he struggled. Rishi Sunak with his why should we like you, he struggled too. It's very difficult. So, John, the Labour manifesto, obviously a big day for Keir Starmer. What did you make of it?
Well, I think for the last few weeks or months, people like you have been saying Labour doesn't have a plan. And there we did see a plan. I think it was 120, 130 pages
Of
of
nothing.
plan. No, there was clearly, I mean, you've said that over and over again, but clearly there was a plan there. What is it? 13,000 community support officers and police officers, 6,500 more teachers, a plan to sort out the borders, ending the tax breaks for private schools, Great British Rail, Great British Energy, 1.5 million homes. I mean, there's loads in there. I think that the accusation that Labour doesn't have a plan for the country doesn't make much sense at all.
Well, even Labour admitted there was nothing new in the manifesto the day before they launched the manifesto. So it's not as though I'm making this up.
No. But you said there's no plan at all. I think the point is they haven't had to come up with ideas at the last minute, because Keir Starmer had his 6 first steps, which they set out. They're quite clear, they're quite consumer friendly, they're quite easy to explain to voters. If you've got 6 good ideas, you just need to sell those to voters rather than just coming up with more and more ideas that just get lost in the wind. So there's no point if Keir Starmer suddenly decided today, oh, well, I had those 6 first steps, I'm just going to scrap them and come up with some new ones. Then when you'd have said, oh, U-turn, he just can't make up his mind, he just keeps changing his opinion over and over again. Whereas I think that's been the problem on the Tory side, is if I said to you, what is in the Tory manifesto, what are the ideas? It is just this hodgepodge which doesn't make sense at all. You've got a bit of tax here, you've got a bit of, the pensions triple lock plus over there, national service plan, but there isn't any kind of, if you went on a doorstep, I think that most Tory MPs would struggle to sell it to voters.
The problem is that I think for Keir Starmer, every day he goes out there and says, this country is broken, it's on its knees, everything's a disaster. And then
you've got 6 steps to sort that out.
The 6 steps, by his own admission, are the 6 first steps. By his own admission, this is a 10-year project in his mind. This is not exactly the groundbreaking vision that will transform this country. It's all tinkering at the edges. And Ed Balls today, the former Shadow Chancellor, he said that this manifesto is a straitjacket, that actually, for the problems that Keir Starmer is saying the country is facing, this is not the solution. There isn't enough in it. There's not enough money. There's not enough tax-raising measures. The financial rules they're abiding to are too tough.
There's a key idea at the centre of it, which maybe you might like, is the idea that you need to grow the economy, which is what we heard from Liz Truss. It was all about grow the economy, grow the economy, grow the economy. And I think the way that she was going about trying to do that with her tax cuts obviously went disastrously wrong. But at least she saw that the country needed growth. Whereas the problem we've had over the last few years with Rishi Sunak is there hasn't been a plan for growth, and any changes he's made haven't really got the economy going. We had the economy figures this week showing the economy has flatlined. The country isn't really going anywhere. I think the idea that Keir Starmer's got of we need to start getting the economy going, we need to start building, if he does succeed in that, and I think it's going to be a tricky job, then you are going to have more money to pay for things like the NHS, schools, and whatever you want to do. And I think actually this idea from the Tories that, oh, it would be a bad thing if Labour had a good majority, actually, I think we've seen from the Tories with an 80-seat majority, they still weren't able to deal with the big tricky issues like overhauling planning, like getting building. If Labour does have a sizable majority that they don't have to worry about MPs on the left of the party, then maybe they will actually be able to get on with some of the things that will change the country.
The problem with the paying for everything through growth is, one, it's not that easy, as we've seen. It's not exactly like the Conservatives are anti-growth. It's not as though they're desperate to not have growth.
They don't really have any plan to get growth, do they, is the problem?
Well, I think Keir Starmer...
Not sure the National Service Plan is going to lead to growth.
Keir Starmer's plan for growth
building houses,
boils down
planning.
To concreting over the countryside. We know that. That's going to be deeply controversial. How's he going to get that through local councils? That's always been the problem. The problem is national politics meets local politics. When those two things clash and you have loads of people saying, I don't want that in my backyard, that's the problem. That's always been the problem with planning. We know this. How is Keir Starmer going to change that? So I think his plans for growth, which are very dependent on reform of planning, it is a bit... it's an aspiration rather than an actual concrete thing that is going to happen. The only concrete is him concreting over the Greenbelt. And actually, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which we all bow down to for their economic analysis, they've said today, great, okay, if he manages to get this planning stuff through, that's great, but that will lead to growth in 4 or 5 years' time. That's not going to pay for anything in the meantime. So there is no way there's any money coming from growth in the next 2 years. At the very, very earliest, it will be 2 years.
But that's why you've got things like the private school thing. That's why you've got the closing down on tax loopholes. That's why you've got the dealing with tax avoidance. And I think that the comparison with the Tory party is they promised loads of things in 2019 and they didn't do it. Rishi Sunak promised loads of things when he became Prime Minister. He's not managed to do any of them. They're promising the same things again. We're going to bring down immigration. That's what David Cameron said. That's what Liz Truss said. Sorry, Theresa May said. That's what Boris Johnson said. All Tory leaders have said it, and it hasn't happened. Why should voters believe them this time? And I think actually come up with a different plan. I think voters would be interesting to see, well, maybe let's give this a chance. It's trying something different. It isn't just voting for the same party again with the same promises and getting the same results.
Keir Starmer has made no commitment on when it comes to reducing migration.
He said he wants to reduce migration.
He hasn't put any numbers. He's put no numbers on it.
He wants to reduce migration.
But he's put no numbers on it.
What's the number the Tories have got?
Well, they want to halve it and then reduce it every year.
It's just not going to happen, though, is it? I mean, David Cameron said tens of thousands. Did that happen? No.
Boris
Johnson said it was going to come
reduce
down.
It by
it didn't
10
happen.
and then he's ticked that off. That's not.
Well, it's just gone up and up under Rishi Sunak, hasn't it? So, I mean, migration, I think it's come down slightly, but it's still at record levels. Net migration is at over 600,000. They've made
Ukraine,
specific promises
Hong Kong,
and they've not kept them.
Because of Ukraine and Hong Kong, you know that they're a big chunk of those visas in the last year. They're a big chunk of the numbers of...
Not of 600,000.
It's a big chunk of it. And Keir Starmer, he has put no timetable.
He said he'll bring it. There's no point. You can come up with a number. You can come up with a number. There's no point having a number if you then just don't deliver it.
But
fine, you could do the Tory idea and just say, "Oh, bring it down to tens of thousands." They'll be like, "Oops, I didn't do it. Vote for me again." There's no point coming up with a number that you can't achieve.
It's an admission of defeat by Keir Starmer that he will not make any headway on
migration. Maybe the Tories should admit defeat after promising all these numbers and never delivering them.
Well, I think they would actually like to bring it down, but the suspicion obviously is that Keir Starmer doesn't want to.
They'd like to bring migration down. They'd like to bring tax down. They'd like to do all number of things, but they just don't do it.
Well, Keir Starmer's putting tax up. We know that. So clearly, we are absolutely already going to have the highest tax burden in history under Keir Starmer.
We have it at the moment under the Tory party, under your tax-cutting hero, Rishi Sunak.
That is before he actually does any of the secret measures that he's clearly not announced today, but is planning to do, such as go for capital gains tax. We've seen in Labour-run Wales that they're rebanding council tax, which is obviously a likely policy that Keir Starmer will steal. And so, the tax burden is going to be the highest ever. It will go up further when the extra bits that he won't tell us about are introduced. So, John, we're almost at the end. What's your moment of the week?
So my moment of the week is Labour MP or Labour candidate Dawn Butler's rap. She's done a new version of 21 Seconds, telling people it's 21 days until the election. I think that most MPs' Twitter game or X game can be pretty lame. It is just tweeting infographics that have been made by the political parties for them. I think good for her trying to do something slightly different.
Yeah, fair enough. She owns it. I mean, as you say, Twitter can be quite
boring in election time.
Yes, so she's livened it up, and good on her.
And Sam, apart from receiving this cupcake, what was your moment of the week?
Well, Ed Davey channeling his inner supermodel by throwing himself down the This Morning catwalk this morning. Now, he looked a little bit more man at CNA than Chanel. It was a good way to engage with viewers, but some might be asking the question, why aren't you telling people your role in the post office scandal?
Instead, you're walking down a catwalk with someone shouting, "Clench your buttocks," which is a different way to campaign.
Indeed.
You can join us again next Tuesday when hopefully we'll have had a bit of sleep after a manic week of manifestos. You can find us on YouTube, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
And you can now email us, so we'd love to hear from you. Contact us on thedivisionbell@reachplc.com. Thank you for listening. This is a Reach Studio production hosted by myself, Sam Lister, and John Stevens. Produced and edited by Lydia O'Malley, Shabir Nurzai. Our researcher is Sheila Mahmoodi, and design and art direction by Curtis Phillips Cozier and Luke Stidson. Audio managed by Matt Millard, and social content managed by Gully Burrows and Ed Washington. Content production and design overseen by Yara Silver, Harry Dumanel and Spencer Robotham.